Welcome to the Industrialization and Localization Expert channel. I'm your host Mwakole Lope, and today we're bringing you a special feature on the top 10 industries that are heavily impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. At ILE, we bring you special features, we bring you insights, we bring you informative sessions to unpack for you these sectors. And the first sector that I'm going to share with you is the international trade. As we unpack these sectors, we are going to be putting these sticker names for you so that we can easily recap at the end of this session. Most developed countries rely heavily on exports of finished goods throughout the globe. This impacts directly on the whole supply chain. We know, for example, if we take China, its economy is dependent on exports because they do heavy manufacturing of various commodities. When the World Health Organization, WHO, declared that the situation had become a pandemic, imports and exports were directly impacted. They were the first country to experience the lockdown, if you remember. So what they did in China, they introduced measures for all goods that are going to be exported or imported to be sterilized upon entering or leaving the country, which meant that the cost and difficulty of international trade eventually increased. That measure is now affecting everyone. Do we have the know-how to sterilize and do all this? No. Some countries have reduced or suspended imports on a lot of merchandise because deliveries of this is difficult, and the cost of these operations is just massive, and the complexities at customs for clearances and everything else. We can say while China has resumed some work or production of some sort, the virus continues to spread across the globe, and we can attest to that. Industry insiders describe the situation as China fought the first half, the world is fighting the second half, but the international trade industry is going to fight all the time. There's massive impact on this particular sector. Number 2, catering. No eat-outs, as we love them, but we continue to unpack what we mean by this. The catering industry continues to suffer heavily. If you look at it this way, it's massive losses. Why? Because nearly all restaurants and eat-outs have been shut down completely since lockdowns in various countries. Some parts of the industry attempted at some point to say we can adapt. For example, restaurants were trying to negotiate with authorities to sell food online and utilize some of their staff members to do deliveries. Most governments didn't buy into that. They didn't actually want to listen. Private caterers, for example, run their businesses to do events, be it at government level or when there's conferences and large events that normally happens. You can imagine they are heavily impacted, including weddings, funerals, sporting events. So all these are hard hit by this pandemic. The losses in this industry remains very high. If we give you an example, it was estimated that During the Spring Festival in China, when they were in a lockdown, the losses were ranging between 700 to 800 million yuan. And this is about 97 to 115 million US dollars just in a month. So you can imagine how many more events that the caterers will have played a role, and that industry is non-existent as we speak. Number 3, this industry is tourism. We are all grounded. Parks, national theme parks, and around the globe, tourist spots, they are all closed down. You can't be walking. Flights are grounded. Hotels remains empty. The most being hard hit are your 4 and 5-star hotels. Or if you are in Dubai, your 7-star hotel. And they only get utilized. The only exception is when you need to quarantine or isolate some of the people that are tested positive, or the ones that suspect they might have, contracted the virus, and you want to monitor them. That's the only time you have a situation where you utilize them. But otherwise, the tourism industry continue to miss quite massively. In most countries, what they do, they will have tourism week as an example to attract lucrative people, both locals and foreigners, to come and visit during that week certain areas. Medium and small sized businesses rely heavily on this to survive. So if this is the case with the pandemic and the lockdown, they're suffering massive losses. You can imagine the tourist agencies are heavily impacted. You can't even do online because no one is supposed to go anywhere, be it local or foreign. As the COVID-19 continue to spread, countries continue to shut down their borders. So there's no movement. The 4th industry that I'm going to introduce to you is entertainment. We all love entertainment, but under these circumstances, we can't even think about it. When it's sad moments, you are likely not to even go and, entertain yourself. You can imagine the world's most lucrative film seasons and festivals, major sporting events, music concerts, just to mention a few, are basically erased from the 2020 calendar. A few countries still have got hope, and maybe at least after October, a few events might take place, but this particular sector is also shut. No entertainment. We are all sitting still, hoping that things are going to improve. So we've shut down this to make sure that we try and curtail the spread of the virus. The only surviving industries in this entertainment are those who offer their services online or products. At least these are the biggest gainers. To name a few, you can think of Netflix and MultiChoice. Besides having to watch old movies, at least there's still something that you can entertain yourself with. It's sad. And the 5th industry that we want to talk about is transportation. We can't be moving, including cargo and other goods and services, except if these essential ones. So many governments have placed restrictions on freedom of movement in order to curb the spread and cluster the infection, because some goods As I mentioned earlier on the international trade, we don't know if they are sterilized. Some still don't believe how long the virus can still, remain on some of the goods. Basically, land, sea, air, train transportation have all been greatly hit. So trips have decreased by almost 70%. We only have got about 30% still in operation to move those essential goods and provide those services, especially to the essential services workers who still need to be ferried from their homes to their workplaces. At the same time, online travel agencies and platforms heavily affected, including, for example, car hire platforms. Transportation is another one that is under wraps. Now, we're going to take you to the sixth one, and this talks to petroleum. You can imagine already, because if you can't have transport, you can't be moving, so your fuel is heavily impacted. So the refineries, as an example, their operations are limited. For example, if we were to give you, one of the largest importers of oil is China. And they are also the second largest consumer after the US. There is a massive decline in oil demands. It's a reality that we're living with. So this also led to sharp drops in international crude oil prices. At the same time, Russia and Saudi Arabia came with unprecedented price war on oil, which brought another spark. During this pandemic period, the drop in oil prices has massively led to crashing stock prices, especially in the US markets. So crude oil, as a traditional risk asset, is very sensitive to macro changes. If the pandemic continues at this trend, because we can see there are no controls, we just test and get results. So there's a risk that oil prices will continue to go further and further and further down, as could have been seen on the 20th of April, a few days ago, where it went down to minus $37 per barrel. We all saw that. This trend is likely to continue on that downward trade. The seventh sector that we are going to introduce for you is real estate. It's one of those that are also heavily impacted, especially construction of commercial properties. For some quiet time now, construction has been halted, and real estate is basically suspended. They try to drive sales, online as well, and some properties to come and be sold without being viewed is just unrealistic. Buyer still wants to come and view the property and assess the surroundings. So that industry is just not going anywhere. Results are to be seen if there will be some online sales happening. But yeah, it's one of those economies that are also hit very hard. And the incomes in terms of rentals is not coming, because businesses that are renting in those properties are not generating revenues. It is also expected that after this epidemic, if policies are not loosened, small and medium-sized, real estate companies that are usually affected, as well as large real estate companies, might start to sell at lower prices to try and recoup some of the monies invested. The only survivors might be those who've got multiple in different regions, because they'll have the luxury to start monitoring the prices. Let's introduce you to number 8. And this is the finance sector. The finance sector also controls quite a lot in the space. Everything else that we do rotates around finances. And you can imagine market hedging has got a huge impact on this industry, because what you have paid at that point and what you have already ordered and it's hedged, yet production has been halted and you don't even know when you're going to release the remainder of the month to pay for whatever that you would have purchased. So the implications are huge. And experts are saying this is likely to continue into the foreseeable future, because also of things like non-performing loan ratios and falling security trading volumes. In the stock market, we've seen global stock markets have witnessed several rounds of big drops, each and every one around the globe. Also, the epidemic impact on the real economy is reflected in the financial markets. I can relate to things like rents, financial expenses, taxes, salaries, and inventories. All these are realities that business owners are currently facing. When an enterprise has got a difficult time, for example, they can't repay loans, the interest owed to banks becomes difficult to even pay, because they are already under pressure. So many countries, yes, are putting relief packages, policies to try and assist those enterprises that are affected in both the formal and the informal sectors. It remains to be seen if all these measures will be able to assist effectively most of these companies for them to be able to operate in a way that we're accustomed to. Sector number 9 that we are going to introduce to you is automobile. Yes, these are related, because the transportation and the automobile, it obviously impacts the production. Production has been suspended and sales just are difficult to carry out. Experts predict that smaller companies that actually manufacture small components and car parts, for example, could be more affected even after this epidemic, because they are more vulnerable than the whole vehicle manufacturer. It is going to be a very difficult time for those component manufacturers to come out and still survive. The last industry that we will be talking about is manufacturing. Manufacturing, it boils down to a variety of components. It can be electronics, it can be cabling, it can be any other component that you can think of. The reason why it has been clustered in this way is because it's very diverse. But IEL has tried to pick just a few of the manufacturing sectors. And many enterprises, we all know, they've halted production because consumer demand for most of these products has reduced and is more likely to continue for a little while into the foreseeable future, because if you are not manufacturing any essential products like pharmaceuticals and vaccines and products that are utilized, syringes or equipment for hospitals and so forth, you are likely not to come out anytime soon and survive. Because manufacturing is relatively asset-heavy industries, and the operations being suspended, companies still have got to pay social security, taxes, rents, other loans, factory building operations, and the interest generated by those. Though governments are trying to do tax reliefs, at the end of the day, the manufacturer still needs to bear this until they make their tax submissions and apply for available, relief funds and everything else. But on a month-to-month basis, most of these expenses they still have to bear. Some will say, luckily, these companies will be offered those loans through various packages organized by governments and other private sector financial institutions and private banks and private investors. What we say is the debt is incurred and they will still have to pay for the debt with some sort of interest. We are not saying these measures are not needed. They are needed. It's one way or the other whereby government departments are trying to support industries and try and ease some of the pressure that comes with this pandemic. But we have to now think differently if you are running an enterprise, because you have to find new ways of taking your manufacturing and production lines, into something else that will still make you profitable. The only ones that are now happier are the ones that are in the medical and protective equipment supplies, because this is the market. The need is not even questionable. Quantities, production lines, including new manufacturers that are currently being supported to manufacture those. We see a very significant growth in those markets. Fellow viewers of ISLE, we hope this brings a proper insight into trying and unpack them. And as a recap, we say international trade standing there at number 1, catering, tourism, entertainment at number 4, and we took you through transportation, which includes goods and petroleum, real estate at number 7, and the last 2 being finance, automobile, as well as manufacturing. These are the insights that we bring for you, and we hope that you will take something home and further unpack on your own what this means to you. And we hope you enjoyed this session. Continue watching our channel, and we say keep safe at home. Let's fight together the COVID-19 pandemic, and the world together we shall win.